Hello, welcome to my lecture. My today's lecture is about society and culture of India from 1200 AD to 1750 AD. Before I delve deeper into the discussion about the topic, I would like to make certain things clear about the today's lecture, that this lecture is meant for lay person who are keen to know about this period society and culture. Towards the end of lecture, I will also introduce my audience to references which they can draw upon for making of narratives on society and culture of Indian society and culture for such a long period, which is 550 years, 5 centuries, 5.5 centuries, very long period. So to begin with, I would like to sum up the discussion in pre-modern India. And then I would like to break this into two rubrics: pre-modern India, Islamic State, phase 1; pre-modern India, Islamic State, phase 2. Why am I doing so? Because from 1200 AD to 1715 AD, India did not have one particular set of Islamic state. It had a Sultanate. Uh, After Sultanate had disintegrated, there was a kind of chaos, anarchy, and decentralizing forces were at play for some time. And then Mughal came, and there was a re-establishment and resurgence of Islamic State under Mughal Empire, which lasted for another, more than 2 centuries. So this is for your understanding. So to begin with, I would like to draw your attention to the establishment of Sultanate dynasty in India. So before Sultanate dynasty was established in India, under the guidance of Muhammad Ghori, who had installed his most loving slave Kutubuddin Aibak at the helm of affairs, and had decided to stay on Indian subcontinent to perpetuate Islamic rule. Before he had undertaken this step, uh, whoever had come to India from the northwestern part of India to attack India, the purpose was to plunder India and its wealth. So when these Islamic followers were coming from the western, uh, western India, and also from the northwestern part of India, what is very important and noticeable in regard to these two, areas where from these Islamic peoples were coming, foreigners were coming. So those who were coming from the western part of India, they were largely traders. They were coming from the Arabic world. They were coming from the north of Africa, and to some extent in the from the Western Asian part of the world. Whereas people coming from the northwest of India, they were mostly raiders. So Muhammad Ghaznavi is one good example who had come to India. But the very interesting thing which one must notice about his interest in India is that even though India had disintegrated before these Islamic raiders had come to India, India had undergone phenomenal decline, especially in the field of polity, culture, and society. Simultaneously, one thing which did not undergo decline was its trade. So, in the field of trade, India had flourished a lot, and it had registered export surplus, as a result of which India had accumulated uh, a corpus amount of wealth, which became a story in the Central Asia, in the West Asia. So people in this part of the world had started taking very keen interest in Indian subcontinent. So Muhammad Ghaznavi, Muhammad Ghori turned out to be these two examples who came to India and they plundered it. But interestingly, Muhammad Ghaznavi, he went back to where he had come from. He paid attention to his empire, that is Ghazni, which under his rule had flourished a lot. Whereas Muhammad Ghori, uh, who had come from the Ghurid Empire, which was again part of the Central Asia, from the lower part of the Ghazni, as one moves from the Ghazni to the Ghurid Empire, that is where Muhammad Ghori had come. But he decided and he intended to stay on Indian subcontinent. And it was this time when Islam was flourishing not only in India, even in the West world, that is in Europe. So it was growing in all directions. So as far as Indian side, eastern side of Islamic growth is concerned, Muhammad Ghori's decision to stay on Indian subcontinent uh, marked a turning point. That was the beginning of Islamic State within India. But before he could actually settle down, it was not an easy task for him to settle down with that ease. He continued facing resistance from various quarters of India, and ultimately he created a room whereby he could have perpetuated his presence in India, but he could not do straight away. Instead of putting himself at the helm of affair, he chose his a few slaves, Kutubuddin Aibak and Bakhtiyaruddin Khilji, and other few more slaves were there who were very popular in his list. Among these popular slaves, Kutubuddin Aibak was at the top of the list, so he placed him at the helm of affair, who instead of coming to Delhi and taking over Indian Empire under his clutch, he chose Lahore to be his center. So that is why it was Lahore in the very beginning which started getting impact of Islamic world, especially from the West Asia, that is Iran, Iraq, Arabic world, and the Central Asian. That is why Lahore became the first center of attraction where all this fusion was taking place. Okay. Now moving on from the establishment of uh, Islamic State uh, under Qutbuddin Aibak, it went on the till it disintegrated under Lodi dynasty in 1526, when Babur, who was a Mongol, who was a Mughal, who had come to India and had demolished pre-established uh, Islamic state setup, and he restarted everything from fresh. So it is very important for all of us to make a difference between these two Islamic state, phase one, phase two. Under phase one, uh, it passed from the slave dynasty, which is also called Mamluk dynasty, to non-slave dynasty, that is a Khalji, and from Khalji to Tughlaq, from Tughlaq to Sayyid dynasty, and eventually it was Lodi dynasty, uh, where disintegration of Delhi Sultanate started taking place, and it disintegrated in full sense, and there was a certain degree of chaos. And then it is in the light of this disintegrated India and the chaos and anarchy that Babur got opportunity to come to India, and he found India very interesting, and he found it easier to rule because he was not able to face his competitors in his own area, that is a Fargana, again Central Asian regions, upper part of that. So he found India easy to rule, so he thought of settling down here, and then he set up an empire which came to be regarded as Mughal Empire. And one thing which is very unique about Mughal Empire, and also a point which distinguishes it from the previous Islamic state, is that under Mughal Empire, it was only one dynasty. That is a Mughal Empire. So from Babur to Humayun, and from Humayun to his son, that is Akbar, and from Akbar to his son, that is Jahangir, and from Jahangir to his son, Shah Jahan, and from Shah Jahan to his son Aurangzeb. So there was a continuity in terms of one dynasty, whereas in the previous Islamic state, you have a dynastic shift. So and then after Aurangzeb, the phase which starts, it's called phase, I would like to call it post Aurangzeb, because it is from here where disintegration of Islamic State too starts taking place, and then it disintegrates because of the internal factors, and also because of the changes which were taking all over world. That is beginning of the European colonial and imperial world. So rather than discussing this economic and the political aspects of the entire in this period, I would like to draw your attention to specific issues, that is the society and the culture of Indian society under these two phases. So it is under this environment and the milieu that the change is taking place. So before I move on to discuss, I would like to dispel a major belief which is unsounded belief, and that belief is that Islamic State, which had come from outside, and the Indian state and the Indian society, they were opponent of each other. So in the beginning, certainly they were different from each other, but the relationship was not antagonistic. It was not always antagonistic. There was no doubt tension between two sorts of society and the culture. But over a period of time, what we see is constant resolution of the tension, and this tension is resolved through various forms, through various channels, through the architecture, through the language, through the the customs, through conversion. And believe me, what we notice in general is that conversion was always by force, but it was not like this. Conversion existed in both forms. It was by force, and it was also by choice. And conversion was popular among people, especially people of the low caste, because in our Indian society, the entire system was actually hierarchized, and it was in the order of importance. So the caste system, in other words, which I call, was not what had characterized Islamic society and the culture. So when the Islamic society came, so people who had suffered considerably from the uh, caste-genic issues, they chose and they found Islam very attractive. They found this very appealing. So that had also appealed to people. And then forceful conversion was also there, but it was not it was not the only thing which was taking place. That is one thing. Another thing, when these people came, actually, uh, whenever they wanted to make a particular structure, be it palace, or be it road, or be it tomb, or be it a graveyards, burial system, they had to rely on Indian materials. They had to rely on Indian labors. So even though they had prototype, or archetype of their own culture from their own region, they could not escape the impact of India, because material which was involved was very much Indian, and people who were involved in making of these structures, that is a laboring mass, they were mostly, by and large, they were all Indian. That is why they were bound to, and these were bound to leave impact on what was coming into existence. And this we call it Indo-Islamic. So Indo-Islamic is an appropriate term which summarizes this socio-cultural reality, that is a socio-cultural fusion. So it is a fusion, it is not actually confrontation. uh, so the best description of this kind of fusion would be cultural accommodation and cultural socio-cultural assimilation. So certainly it does not mean that there is no tension, but this tension is getting resolved over a period of time, and it is not a small period. It is a 550 years of time which I am putting under my purview. So what I would like my audience to pay attention to is attention to a PowerPoint presentation which I have developed. So if they just go through that point, it basically will familiarize them, acquaint them with the outline of what all I have to say. So it will give a guideline. So I would like all of you to pay attention to this. So just let me share the screen. So this is the topic actually, which everyone must note down, underline. And then moving on to what I already discussed is pre-modern India, Islamic society and culture phase one, where in the first phase, you have Islamic state, but under different dynasties, which ultimately disintegrates under Lodi dynasty. And then it all paved the way for the foreigners to come again. And this attack of foreigners onto India was not something new. It continued to happen during this period also. But once this entire state was weak, where decentralizing forces had become very strong, so it became easier for Babur to move to India and take control of the things and subdue. So after this phase is over, in 1526 AD, you enter a new phase altogether, that is the Mughal Empire. And under Mughal Empire, you have, starting from the Babur to the Aurangzeb, and after Aurangzeb, again the decline starts. Actually, decline had started from the time of Aurangzeb because of his certain policies which were not very accommodative. So after Aurangzeb, it all had fallen apart, and it had actually started falling apart, and which concretized under the later subsequent Mughal rulers. And especially it had coincided with the coming of Europeans who took advantage of this disintegration, and they seized upon the opportunities, and they established their own economic base, and from economic base they soon actually transformed into the political base. So that is one thing. And then kindly pay attention to this slide, where I am trying to sum up what kind of changes took place in the society. So I have framed two terms. One is Islamization of the Indian society and culture. That means Islam was leaving impact on our Indian society and culture, which was visible through the conversion of people to Islamic society willingly and also by coercion. And then reason why people were shifting to the Islam was that it was egalitarian and also out of fear, because of course there was a great degree of violence during all this period. But one must also take note of the fact that it was not only popular among low caste people. Even today, if one goes to western UP, that is Meerut, Saharanpur, Bulandshahr, and if one visits certain part of Rajasthan, like Fatehpur, Sikar, and other parts, so in those parts of India, upper caste, especially Rajputs, are also said to have converted to Islam. So that is why even to this date, one would find people with the Hindu name and the surname of the Muslim, and vice versa. Yeah, and these surnames are especially prevalent in the upper caste Hindu society. So this was taking place at multiple layers, and picture is not very straightforward. It's not that simple. It is very complex picture. So simplifying itself would amount to a misinterpretation of this entire socio-cultural change which was taking place in this society. Another aspect was a other way around. So it was not just Islam which was making impact on Indian society and culture. It was Indian society which was also leaving impact on the Islam. And very good example is that before Islam came to India, prior to that, it was a highly egalitarian, where it was more or less horizontal. Whereas after coming to India, after having spent a pretty long period of time, it also imbibed various cultures and caste also. So when it came, actually it tried to dent the caste system, but it itself actually got co-opted. And believe me, even to this date, you have lower caste, and there are OBC phenomena within the Muslim as well, even the tribal phenomena. So caste system, rather than becoming changed and rather than becoming eliminated from the Indian society, it entered into the Islamic society. And today one must often hear the word Pashmanda Muslim. So this Pashmanda Muslim is basically it denominates two things. One is economic condition, and one is a social condition. So socio-economic condition. So that is those Pashmanda Muslims. They are not same Muslim as the upper state of the Muslims. They are actually considered lower, and their economic condition is also it is deplorable. And on the basis of this, they have also been asking for the reservation. So that is one thing which is in existence to this date. Then moving on to the another examples, when the Islam and India had come into contact with each other, so there was a great degree of exchange of ideas. So in the field of the medicine, in the field of the music, in the field of the architecture, in the field of the dress, customs, language, for example, Urdu, Persian, Arabic, and so these were the things which were actually coming into these, and they were giving rise to a new reality altogether. And that reality is called the fusion. So in the field of society, it was a cultural, it was a fusion. But when you boil down to the religion, which is again embedded in the society, that is called the development of syncretism. So syncretism is basically Islamic society was highly religious society, and Indian society was actually religious, but not one found form of religion. So when they came together, so they actually in the beginning were in the confrontational mode, but later on there was a kind of intermeshing. So they were getting enmeshed into each other, and that actually later on gave rise to a high degree of tension. So people who were witness to this tension from the both side, from the Islamic side and from the non-Islamic side within India, they were trying to find solution. So on behalf of Islamic society, Sufi belief was what actually tried to create a room where Islamic radical system could be removed. Simultaneously, on behalf of Indian society, non-Islamic society, Bhakti tradition was what was trying to resolve this tension, where they were trying to make a space for the people from other and also people from within uh, to live life where people of different faiths and different ideologies can coexist. So this Sufi tradition and Bhakti tradition is part of syncretic tradition, which was trying to create a third space where people are no longer radical. And that can be seen in the form of the Urdu. Urdu itself is a syncretic development where you have examples of Persia, Arabic, Pashto, Turkic, and many examples of the Indian. So Hindi itself is not something which was actually part of India. Hindi is again a syncretic tradition. It is coming out of Urdu, Persia, and out of Sanskrit. So, but Hindi is actually close to what was happening within the Indian society, but it was not embedded in it. It was coming out of it. So this is result of tension which was existent within our Indian society. At the same time, the Urdu was a result of tension which was present in the Islamic society. So these two syncretic traditions were trying to resolve their issues, and they were coming together to create a third space where people could have coexisted. So these are the examples. Then let's move on to the new areas. Uh, Although we have discussed everything in this form, what one must not fail to understand is that Islam itself is not a monolithic society. Within Islam, if you actually see Babar, who had come to India, he himself was a Muslim. So, but who he fought, he himself was also Muslim, like Ibrahim Lodi, whom Babar had fought. So the Muslim was fighting Muslim. So it's not that it is a very serious mistake if one is actually homogenizing the entire interpretation. If one is trying to put everything in a monolithic order within Islamic society during Sultanate period as well as during Mughal period, one thing which was very common was that there was a contestation and there was a conflict which existed within the Muslim also, because Muslim society, Islamic society was not one single society. There were Turks, there were Afghans, there were people who were Mongols, Persians. So they were not actually gelling very well with each other, despite Islamic solidarity. There was a lot of tension within Islamic society too. Same thing can be said about India also. So breaking this monolith image of Islamic society is very important. So it is in the light of this that I would like to put our discussion of society and culture in India from 1200 to 1715. That is beginning of the mid of the 18th century. So in the light of this, I would like to sum up my discussion, and I would like to inform my audience that kindly pay attention to the references which will help them develop narratives of society as well as culture. And if they would like to pay attention to the other aspects like economy and the polity, these references would be of great help in those regards too. And with this, I would like to end my lecture. And thank you very much for the patience.